Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I was 8 years old when this happened. In 2008, my father was a high-level police officer in Chicago. Due to his status in the force and his current employment, I don't want to give his real name, so we'll just call him Jim. When Jim was working, he made a lot of enemies, including some in the mob, the Chicago outfit. One of the mob members blamed Jim for the death of his girlfriend in a gas-triggered explosion, since he had shown up too late to intervene. After this, multiple attempts were made on his life, including attempts by fellow officers who had been paid off. One night, while my dad was at work, my mom got a phone call. As soon as she picked up, her face lost all color. She didn't explain what was happening, but I overheard something about our home being a target. I tried to calm my little sister, Barb, as she started crying. My mom had us each pack a backpack with some essentials, and we were quickly escorted to a private location. I was really scared because the place looked like a dingy factory. As I turned to ask my mom to leave, I saw him, a tall, strong man with burn scars covering half of his face. This was Harvey, my dad's old friend, and he was pointing a gun at us. With the gun aimed at my mom's head, he instructed her to call my dad and tell him to come alone, without the police, or else all three of us would be dead. I sat there shaking, holding back sobs as my mom tried her best to calmly tell my dad where to go. After about 10 minutes, I saw my dad running toward us, screaming and begging Harvey to let us go. Harvey said something about taking revenge for his family, but I struggled to understand him over my sister's cries. He then told my dad that he was going to kill one of us. Harvey started pointing the gun at my mom as my dad pleaded with him. Then Harvey grabbed me and pointed the gun at my head. My dad begged him to stop. I could hear Harvey tightening his grip on the trigger. He told my dad to tell me everything was going to be okay, and my dad did. This man was so sick and twisted that he wanted to see my dad humiliated before he killed his only son. In what I thought were my final moments, I began to pray. Suddenly, I felt Harvey's grip loosen, and I was free. Apparently, my dad had told a trusted law enforcement partner to follow him and stay hidden. That officer, who had a history of losing family members, couldn't stand seeing me almost killed. He got behind Harvey and tackled him to the ground, disarming him. When Harvey was tackled, he hit the ground hard, striking his head and dying on impact. I was so relieved the situation was over that I began to sob and clung to my dad. Since that day, we've moved away, and my dad eventually became a professor. Life is much better now, and I'll never go back to Chicago again. This happened on the night of my little sister's 18th birthday. It was me, her, our older brother, and someone else heading to the north side of Chicago to go to a strip club. Our brother found a parking spot and told us to go in while he took a piss. We decided to wait for him instead. While we waited, my sister was passing out edibles. When our brother rejoined us, my sister gave him the last piece. We started walking to the strip club when we heard a car coming out of an alley, pulling up behind us. The driver yelled out, "Yo, what are y'all doing here?" I already knew what was about to go down just from that question alone. We ignored him and kept walking. Then he yelled another question, "Hey, y'all know C?" He asked us twice. I whispered to my brother that my gun was in the car. Literally, as soon as I said that, the guy in the car started shooting at us. We ran. My brother tripped, but quickly got back up. I turned onto a busy street and saw the other person in our group following me. When I glanced back, I noticed my sister had kept going straight into a darker block. I instantly got scared for her. As I kept running, I saw my brother across the street, running in the same direction as me. We ran right past the police, but I felt like I was being followed, so I just kept running. Someone behind me told me to stop, but I ignored them. I saw a Walgreens and told the person with me we could go in there. We entered the store, and I waited for my brother, but he never showed up. I called my sister to see if she was okay. She told me she had ended up in an alley and tried to get help from a Chinese worker, but he had shooed her away. I told her we were at Walgreens and to meet us there. Then I called my brother to check on him. He told me he had gone to the strip club and informed the security there about what had happened. Eventually, my brother and the strip club security came to the Walgreens to get us. The whole time, I felt like we were being watched. There were a lot of people staring at us. The police escorted us back to my brother's car. I was really worried the car had been broken into and my gun stolen, but thankfully it hadn't. We got in the car and headed home. I held my gun in my hands the entire ride. Thank God, none of us were hurt and nothing else happened, but it was still a terrifying experience. I live in one of the most unsafe cities in the US, Chicago. Although the South Side, where I live, has a lot of crime, my community consists of many police officers and firefighters, so I have the luxury of not constantly worrying about my safety. From time to time, people from less safe neighborhoods wander in to rob or intimidate some kids, but it doesn't happen often. For reference, I live in a small house that I rent. I'm a 21-year-old female, and I live with my 2 younger sisters and my mom. Occasionally, my boyfriend comes over, but it's rare for men to enter our house, and we don't have a dog. Around April, my mom told me that she and my sister had seen a man in a black hoodie walking up and down our block. She warned me to be on the lookout. My mom grew up in one of Chicago's rough neighborhoods, so she's often paranoid about things like this. I brushed it off. The next day, I pulled up in front of my house and saw a man in a black hoodie standing near my neighbor's garbage cans. I couldn't see his face, but he had a larger build and average height. He also had a bag with him, and he seemed to be trying to act normal. As soon as I saw him, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Luckily, my boyfriend was with me. When the man noticed us, he started walking away briskly. As we got out of the car, I told my mom, and she got even more freaked out. The man had left his bag behind when he walked off. When I looked inside, I found a bunch of snacks, some half-eaten, some unopened. The whole situation creeped me out. Why was this guy hanging around, eating snacks, and watching my family? That night, my mom became increasingly paranoid, checking the windows frequently to see if the man was still around. Around 8 p.m., I heard her scream for my boyfriend and me. I ran over to the window and saw the man across the street, staring directly at our house. His hands were deep in his pockets, and he was clearly watching us. My mom called 311, the non-emergency number, and reported him. When the cops showed up, the man walked quickly down the alley. I figured an innocent person would have stayed to talk to the police. The fact that he kept hiding his face and running every time someone noticed him made me even more uneasy. As the night went on, he kept appearing, staring into our house. We called the police multiple times, but he always managed to evade them by walking or running away. This continued until 2 a.m., when the police finally said they'd just keep circling the area. The next day, the man was back, walking around our house and staring inside again. This time, the neighbors started noticing too and called the police. After about a week of this, he finally stopped coming around. I'm so thankful for our neighbors. Their vigilance made him feel watched, and he eventually left us alone. However, I'm still uneasy. I worry whenever I come home late at night, wondering if he's still out there. The hoodie prevented me from ever seeing his face, so for all I know, he could be following me in a public area, and I wouldn't even recognize him. One thing is for sure, he's made me much more hyper-aware of my surroundings. After my 8th grade year, my family moved from Chicago to Arizona. I was a bit of a chunky kid due to childhood trauma, but that's a story for another time. My freshman year, I became anorexic. I stopped eating and focused heavily on my PE classes. When I did eat, it was just crackers and a Snapple. This resulted in me dropping a lot of weight. My lovely family didn't notice that I wasn't eating, but they praised me for losing weight. My mom even bought me a new summer wardrobe consisting of tank tops, miniskirts, tube tops, you get the idea. Now for the story. I went back to Chicago every summer during high school to visit my grandma and other family who still lived there. This happened the summer before my sophomore year, so I was about 15. Puberty had hit hard, and of course, men started to notice. I had an on-again, off-again relationship with a guy I had been dating since I was little. He was controlling, picking out my clothes and trying to dictate what I could and couldn't wear, but at that age, I didn't feel like I had a choice. He was my first love, after all. One day, I was headed around the corner to a restaurant called Maxwell's. My grandmother lived on the south side of Chicago, which could be violent, but it felt like home to me. When I got to the restaurant, I placed my order at the counter. There was a guy standing off to the side, staring at me. Maxwell's isn't a typical restaurant, it has two doors directly across from each other. When you walk in, there's a long counter to your right with thick plexiglass, about 2 inches thick, to protect against gunshots. The door across from you is the exit. After I placed my order, the guy kept staring at me. I tried my best to avoid eye contact. As a 15-year-old girl, 5'3" and 130 pounds, I figured it was best to stay out of his way. He slid over and said, "Hey, what's up? What's your name?" Feeling awkward, I stupidly gave him my first name. He told me his name was Eric and kept staring at me. Then he said he was 28 and asked how old I was. I told him I was 15. He immediately flipped a switch, calling me a liar. I assured him I wasn't lying and explained that I was in high school, just visiting family from out of state. He got really close, right in my face, and his breath reeked of stale cigarettes. I instinctively slid back against the wall, trying to make eye contact with the guys behind the plexiglass, hoping they'd intervene. They noticed I was uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. He kept repeating that I was lying and said that if I didn't want to talk to him, I should have just said so. Right then, my order was ready. I grabbed my food and bolted out the door. I could hear his footsteps behind me. I tried to cut through an alley because I knew I could get to my boyfriend's backyard before making it back to my grandmother's house. The guy kept yelling my name and calling me all kinds of names. Unbeknownst to me, my boyfriend had been watching me walk to the restaurant. Being the person he was, he kept an eye on me and saw the entire situation unfold. He stepped in, and the guy backed off, heading back toward the restaurant. Of course, my boyfriend blamed me, insisting I had led the guy on or flirted with him in some way. I know better now, and I'm no longer in that relationship. But I'll admit, it was one time I was grateful he was keeping an eye out for me. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.